I want to go back to the New Testament reading, which has these words: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." I wonder how that verse from Colossians fits with your idea of Jesus. Compassion, kindness, humility. Yeah, I think they fit very well with our understanding of a loving and forgiving Jesus. Because Jesus was man and is God, and as God, he was and is both male and female in character and behaviour. These ways of behaving, kindness, humility, etc., they're not gender related, of course they're not, but when we try to picture them in our society, we tend to see them as quite female traits. Ways in which we would like our mothers to behave: gentle, kind, patient. It's lovely if our fathers behave this way too, of course, in fact all Christians. But in fact, we don't see this kind of role model all that often. People who demonstrate consistent kindness and humility and patience are all too rare. Even mothers, and even our own mothers, will have found it hard to be consistent role models of kindness, humility and patience in the face of our, and definitely my, childish behaviours. I was talking to a friend this week about Mothering Sunday, and knowing that we'd both now lost our mothers, we compared notes about how we related to Mothering Sunday. I am very fortunate. This is the first Mothering Sunday when my daughter will receive her very own Mother's Day card from her son. And that shift in our family to another generation has meant a new dimension for today. But my friend has no children, and we talked of memories of our own mothers. And she recounted a special local scene where she had sat talking with her mother not long before she died. In fact, it was at Rottingdean, looking out over the sea. And each year on Mothering Sunday, she tries to visit this place, or at least recall the scene as a precious memory for her. For myself, my mother's ashes are scattered in our garden at home, near the pond where we both sat as her mind was starting to break away from her body through disease. Yet we had a time of calm there together. My Mothering Sunday posies go to this place in my garden each year. So thinking of mothers, it can take us to peaceful and contented places, but also to sadness sometimes. And the best place to turn when we are sad is the Bible, to find comfort and guidance for our own cares. And we find Mary, of course, the most famous mother in the New Testament. According to the scriptures, Mary, a humble village woman who lived in a small town, so insignificant as to lead Nathanael to say, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" But out of it, and from the womb of the peasant woman, came the greatest man the world has ever known. As a virgin, Mary bore Christ in a miraculous way, and Elizabeth spontaneously gave her the most honourable of titles, Mother of the Lord, and praised her unstintedly as one blessed among women. And later Mary was married to Joseph the carpenter, and she bore him 4 sons and several daughters, the former being named James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, and the daughters not named in the Bible. During his ministry, none of his brothers believed in him. In fact, they sneered at him and once concluded that he was mad and wished to arrest him and take him away from Capernaum. But as the result of his death and resurrection, his brothers became believers and were among the number gathered in the upper room before Pentecost. And this event is the last biblical glimpse of Mary we have. So from the Bible we learn of a mother who gave trust and faith and obedience to God from a very young age. One who brought up her son in a household governed by what we now call the Old Testament of the Bible, who duly presented him to the temple at age 12, and who we find gradually isolated further and further from her. Especially after the wedding at Cana, he slips away from her life. She looked after him, or been with him, for 30 years. And then suddenly he's no longer at home. And who knows how much of this she understood at the time. Did she resent her son's independence? He didn't go home throughout those last 3 years of his life, choosing the company of others, many others, over family. And of course we see her at the cross, having witnessed his agony and rejection by both Rome and his own people, having accepted the danger she warned him against and been put to death. As a name, Mary is related to the Old Testament Miriam, and to Mara, the name Naomi used to describe her affliction, and to Mara with an H at the end, the name of the bitter water reached by the Israelites in their wilderness journeys. So the original and major sense of Mary as a name is that of bitterness, something most mothers experience at some part of their lives, which links with the piercing of the sword through her soul as predicted by Simeon at that temple. This most blessed woman faced all the trials we expect from parenthood, and many more. But is she the only mother we find in the Bible? Well, of course not. There are many women in the Bible, including mothers of families such as Elizabeth, mother of John the Baptist, and Naomi, I've mentioned, who lost her husband and 2 sons in the foreign land of Moab, but found peace through her daughter-in-law Ruth when she returned to her homeland in Bethlehem. But, and here's the crunch question, were all mothers in the Bible kind, humble, and patient? How exactly does kindness come into it in our Old Testament reading when we hear of the mother of Moses abandoning her baby son in a papyrus basket in the river? What kind of motivation would it take to do such a thing? And yes, maybe it's easy to explain that she was trying to save the child's life from the new rule of killing imposed by Pharaoh. But could there have been other ways to hide him that weren't quite so dangerous? She'd managed for 3 months. In this story, it's the mother's courage and action which saves not just her son, but all the Israelites he eventually leads back from exile in Egypt. So now the Bible starts to flesh out the picture of motherhood for us. We see not only obedience, humility, and patience, but bitter experience and courageous action. Perhaps a more believable picture of motherhood. And one more thing. We hear much of the church fathers in the early church who nourished and inspired people then. And we've been learning about them in our Developing Discipleship course on Tuesday evenings here at St. George's. But were there only church fathers? Were there no church mothers? Well, the answer, of course, is that there were. There were church mothers. Perhaps not quite so written about, but they were there. As soon as the church got going, women were there as recorded in Acts. There was Lydia. She ran a business in expensive dyes, so expensive that they were used for the emperor's clothes. She was able to offer accommodation to Paul. The author of Acts seems to go out of his way to show that women and men were equally responsible members of the church. We hear of Chloe, who hosts church meetings in her house, of Phoebe the deacon, probably patron of some charitable society, and the well-travelled couple, Priscilla and Aquila, who accompanied Paul and taught theology. Like many Christian couples to this day and in this church, they form the backbone of the church community. These are, in general, in the Bible, but not always, well-off women, with money, status, time, and space to do good works. though there were poorer women as well, including widows supported by the church, working in that early Christian community. These biblical church mothers, beside the fathers, set patterns for Christian life right from the start. Then in the 3rd century we find martyrs, Perpetua and Felicity, both of whom went to their deaths for not renouncing their Christian faith, leaving young children, in Felicity's case a very young baby, to be looked after by other Christian women. We find founders of monasteries and theologians who are women of the 4th century, Paula, Eustochium, Marcella, Macrina. So the Bible shows us pictures of women who were mothers of the early church. Women who may have been censured by contemporary and later authors because of their faith and their strength. Women who endured much to nurture the church family. So as we celebrate the wonderful pictures of gentle, caring motherhood, which abound on Mothering Sunday and are quite beautiful, not just on cards and gifts, but also in our own memories, let's also offer prayer for those strong, courageous mothers of the church who laid the foundations of our worship, and those strong, courageous women of today's church who face up to prejudice and spite and are determined to follow their vocation to nurture today's church family. Amen.